Welcome back to my conversation with Dr. Raul Vazquez talking about the coronavirus. Let's get right back into it. Now we're going through, the early stages of this, and as it progresses, things will change. At this stage, is there a cost involved with the testing and the treatment, and will that evolve? If there's no cost now because of the emergency situation, in the future, will you have to pay to be tested? How's that going to work in terms of, is it going to be expensive for people to deal with this in the future?
No, before this epidemic, the NAT test, which is what I call a nucleic acid amplified test, was about $200 to $300. So it wasn't cheap. I think, it's free now. Everything's going to be free through this whole idea. We're hoping that when they mass produce it, and with some of the machines and stuff, that the tests begin to drop in value in terms of how much they cost now. But they are expensive. They're not always cheap.
Okay.
I mean, for now, if you're coming to get tested at our stations, everything's free. You're not being charged, and the insurance has waived that, so that's not an issue right now. Everything's free.
Viruses have been the big problem health-wise for the longest time. I mean, we've come up with antibiotics, and that's kind of wiped out a lot of the bacterial infections that have been a plague of mankind in the past. But viral infections still are a problem. And cancer, correct me if I'm wrong, but cancer is a virus. And because we haven't been able to cope with that, I mean, just can you briefly tell me why viruses are such a problem? Is it because they mutate so quickly, or is there something else that is kind of difficult to solving that puzzle?
Yeah, I mean, they mutate, like you say. Sometimes you can have two viruses in one. So, coronavirus could have corona and something else mixed in there. So you're going to get a double exposure to different things. I think that remember, it doesn't fit the sort of life model like bacteria and other things. Viruses are they're non-existent. It's a piece of something, but it's an RNA or a DNA type of structure that it just finds its way to replicate. And, it's like we've been fighting the common cold forever. We could never find a cure because they just replicate. But the good thing is they don't, in the past, they didn't really cause havoc. They would cause some symptoms and disability, but not kill a lot of us. Not like they're evolving to do now. But like I said, it's an RNA or a DNA kind of component, and it's just like hepatitis A, hepatitis B, hepatitis C. We found ways to treat those because they were easier. These are very difficult. I mean, even with the flu shot, even though every year we have to kind of compose the flu of different types of influenza. So it could be influenza A, influenza B, and they sprinkle all the stuff into it. This past year, the flu shot was not as effective because we saw more of of the influenza B, which we don't really have great vaccines for. A, we do. So it's just going to take more genetic engineering and learning how to really tackle the areas of the virus. And I believe for the coronavirus, I talked about these ACE type 2 receptors that are in the nose and also in the airways. That's where the virus is going to be focused. And that's where a lot of the drugs are being developed to do, is to attack those receptors so you're not being, so the virus doesn't get into the system. And if we develop with those particular receptors antibodies that attack that, when the virus comes in, it'll attach to the antibodies and we'll be protected against this particular virus. But your question is a hard one.
Yeah, obviously,
No
we haven't been able to solve it, and the finest minds have been working on that forever. Viruses are they're tough, and so that's the challenge. And speaking of the flu, and you mentioned the flu, I think we talked about this the last time. Worldwide, the flu, typically every year, the common flu, kills up to 650,000 people worldwide every year. And so far this year, coronavirus has killed about 165,000 people. It's almost like a sports score. These are numbers. But we still say that the coronavirus seems to be more dangerous, and we're treating it as if it's more dangerous because the economies have shut down. The world has basically come to a halt. And some people out there don't understand why the coronavirus is being treated as much more dangerous than the typical flu, even though the numbers say the flu is very deadly every year. Can you kind of go over that again briefly? We're almost out of time, but briefly tell us why corona is being treated so much more seriously.
Well, the flu, at least we have treatments for it. So there's different medicines we could use for the flu. And even at that number, we were able to, we have this number that you mentioned. With the corona, the good thing, because of all that we did with social distancing and really creating a sort of pandemic noise around the world, we ended up with the numbers we're ending. We could have been at 2-3 million people worldwide. I mean, it would have been, the deaths would have been huge. So the fact that we took action with public health measures and did some of this stuff and are developing testing, because this, in my lifetime, 30 years in practice, I've never seen anything this infectious, that it's so contagious. And I just think if we didn't do what we're supposed to do, it would have been, probably the flu on steroids times 1,000. So we would have had a really catastrophic numbers. That because we did what we did, we didn't see. So I don't want people to think, well, it wasn't that bad. And now, across the country, we had like 60,000 deaths. Those are the recorded deaths. We have some people like, in the inner city, in the Bronx area, where you had close to 3,700 people that died at home that were never tested. But you don't normally expect that many people dying at home. So I think the numbers that we in this country have are close to 100 and 120,000. But the numbers were never really truly calculated because there wasn't enough tests. So even though we say 60, we have to thank God it was just 60, because if we didn't do what a lot of these individuals in the offices and the governors and the president, everyone that did what they did, really saved humanity, because I think it would have been a lot worse.
Well, and finally, we're talking about now, or we're hearing about the curve kind of flattening out and starting to decline a little bit. It almost seems like we're coming out the other side and things are getting a little bit better. Cautiously, we're optimistic that it's starting to get a little bit better, and so opening up again. I mean, with the warmer weather hopefully coming, hopefully, do you think that we've been through the worst of it now, at least for this season? Is the warmer weather going to help, and are the cases going to decline for the season? Where's this going now in your estimation?
So, I mean, from what I'm seeing is, remember, we're starting to test more. So I think as we test more, we'll get a better idea. I don't think Buffalo's hit its peak. I think New York did, but I think this week and the next week, you'll see the rise where we're heading in that direction. Weather, where I thought weather would be a good thing, we have this in the Caribbean islands, in Puerto Rico, we have it in Dominican Republic. So the virus and the temperature there is 85 degrees. So I don't see that being a big game changer. What I'm worried about this particular coronavirus being is it's like the Spanish flu, and we get that other wave coming in September and October. I believe we're going to get that. But I think because we've already done what we've done, and we're going to be able to test some individuals, we'll know exactly who to kind of who to use during those times and who's protected. Maybe we may have something that the medicines that are working more for the prevention. So we start to develop better protocols for that second, but we still have another wave coming.
Okay. Well, Dr. Raul Vazquez, thanks so much for being my guest on The Big Picture. Very informative. We're going to have you back again as this progresses, and we'll check in with you. We're going to put up your contact information again for people who want information. They can call in to your information line and get some guidance on how to deal with this. We thank you for helping the community. You've been a great help to the Western New York community. Again, my guest, Dr. Raul Vazquez, and thank you for watching The Big Picture. We're out of time now for this episode of The Big Picture. Thanks, as always, for watching WBBZ-TV. hopefully we bring you information that you don't get anywhere else. And, you know, this is your TV station, your local TV station. We will see you next time on The Big Picture.